Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. How you all doing out there, gang? It does seem that everyone's talking about Industry 4.0 and so many other big tech buzzwords at the minute, but today's guest is going to argue that the fifth industrial revolution is already on the horizon. And today's guest is Mark Hughes, and he's going to discuss how factories have undergone a revolution, with manufacturing and supply chain industries already moving from the fourth industrial revolution to the fifth, and manufacturing leaders are increasingly valuing the benefits which automation can bring to their business. We are already seeing retailers experimenting with augmented technologies and virtual reality, and robots moving from factory floors to frontline response, and 3D printers being used to manufacture masks en masse. Then we've got the future of factories and the radical redefinition of how organisations use technology, people and processes, and how together they're fundamentally changing business performance. And for me, all this paints a promising picture of the manufacturing future. And Mark is from a company called Epicor, so we're going to be finding out all about them and the work that they're doing and the problems that they're solving. But I've invited Mark onto the podcast today to share his journey in tech, where his passion came from, and most importantly, where we're heading. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the southwest of the UK, where Mark Hughes is going to talk about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Mark Hughes. I'm Regional Vice President for the UK and Ireland for Epicor Software, which really means I look after our new business sales and I look after our customer account teams, selling technology solutions into manufacturing, distribution, builders, merchants, food producers, those types of businesses. Normally based in our Bracknell office, but like pretty much everybody else at the moment, been based out of my home office for the last 14 months. Looking forward to getting back and seeing people. I have a manufacturing systems engineering degree from Warwick back in the dim and distant past, which was a great degree because, again, it combined technology and manufacturing, and that really set me off on the path of my career and where I've been. And since then, 20 years of experience in the technology sector, been into thousands of businesses over the years, I think, helping them take advantage of technology and use of systems. And I guess I consider myself very lucky in that respect that I get to go to hundreds of businesses a year, normally under normal times, and see what they're doing with technology and how they're moving things forward. So sort of all come together nicely from my education right through to my career. So it's been good.
And you did mention that about your career and how that put you on the path that you're on today. But a question I often ask my guests is, where did your love for technology initially come from? I appreciate you might have to dig deep here, but is there anything that springs to mind of what lit that spark?
Oh, absolutely. God, that makes me think right back. I think I can remember right back to the early days of a ZX81. Remember those computers, home computers, the first ones with the paper keyboards and a Spectrum with rubber keyboards. And I guess one of my first loves for technology, probably taking my first Spectrum and ripping that rubber keyboard off it and putting it in a case with a proper keyboard. And probably not long after that, progressing to, again, some of your listeners will remember an Atari ST, which I think at those days had 512K of memory, and actually upgrading that to a whole meg of memory, but having to solder chips onto the motherboard to do it. So I think, right back into, I'm going to say, 30, 40 years ago, those days of proper tinkering with technology. But then I think where that connection to business then came, I mentioned already, I did a degree at Warwick. One of the things that was mandatory was taking a 10-week placement between your second and third year at the time and spending that in industry. And I actually ended up working for a company called Rely on Beds, who are still based in Wellington in Somerset. And at the time, they were actually rolling out a new ERP system. It was an Epicor system, and you'll see a connection there. I went in just as sort of this placement student, spent 10 weeks with them, and they said, look, this is fantastic. You're doing a great job. Stay for a year. So I actually took a year out, spent a year with them rolling out their ERP system. And that's when I really realized that you can really change a business through technology for the better. So, every part of the business can be touched by an ERP system, by technology, and you can make it better. And that, I think, was where my excitement for bringing technology and businesses together, especially manufacturing businesses, came from, I think.
I think we must be of a certain age, because I had a very similar background with those spectrums, and then even Acorn electrons and BBCBs, and filling out code from magazines just to try and get something to work. Do you remember those days?
Oh, absolutely. Making pixels change color on screens and all of those, and tapes, of course. I was thinking about this now you mention it, putting a tape in the tape drive and listening to that whining noise as you tried to load programs, and it was hit and miss whether it worked off the cassette. Yeah.
Man, that sound, and also the sound of a modem connecting, it doesn't get much better than that. It's almost an album waiting to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yes, the modem bleeps as you manage to hopefully get a dial-up connection. But
the sweet sound of a US robotics modem connecting. But here in 2021, I suppose over the last 12 months, Industry 4.0 has become somewhat of a buzzword. But can you tell me more about how factories have undergone a revolution, with manufacturing and supply chain industries already moving from fourth industrial revolution to possibly the fifth? I mean, can you expand on that?
Yeah, I can. And I think what's really intriguing when we talk about industrial revolutions, and I'm going to talk about a customer in a minute, if I can, who I think sums this up really well. But I think if we look at histories of industrial revolutions, what's really incredible is the pace of change. So I think roughly around the late 1700s, 1780, something like that, was in just, the first industrial revolution, mechanization, really. And then, it took another 100 years for the second industrial revolution. And then, another 100 years after that for the third. We're talking about the gap from fourth to fifth being, 12 months, 18 months, something like that. So again, that kind of rate of change is just incredible. And I think it sort of sums it all up. So third industrial revolution, automation. Fourth, all about digitization. The fifth, and I tried to get my head around what is the Industry 5.0, what's it all about? And I think the best definition I can come up with is it's kind of about personalization. Everybody expects everything to be absolutely specific to them. And as consumers, we want that. And I think that's, in a B2B world is becoming the same. So, from what I can see, Industry 5.0 is all about taking all those good things that have happened before and then really relating them to exactly what people want and what people need. I think what's really good about Industry 5.0 is it combines people and automation, though, because I think you have to get humans back into the production process to collaborate with cobots and AI and all of those other things to really bring value-added performance. So where Industry 4.0 was all about tech, I think 5 starts to bring people back in as well, which is another thing I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about what we do in the UK in terms of people and knowledge and innovation and so on. But it's all right if I pick on a particular customer of ours. I think sums up industrial revolutions really well. So Heathcote Fabrics, long-term customer of ours based down in Tiverton in Devon, and they were founded. Their founder John Heathcote, right back in the 1830s, and he actually at that point developed a machine that could make lace. And it's hugely controversial. He was originally based in Leicestershire, and the lace makers up there, ransacked his factory and burnt his looms because, they could see it putting them out of a job. Over the years, they've evolved. He moved to Tiverton, actually, down in Devon, to get away from all of the lace makers setting his looms on fire. And but they've evolved throughout the years, gone through all those industrial revolutions, interestingly now what they do is they make completely personalized fabrics for industrial applications, whether that be drive belts or fireproof fabrics. But what they've just done is to make the parachute fabric that landed the Perseverance rover on Mars. So they've gone from right back in the 1830s adopting, mechanization, developing looms, right through to this personalization, customization of a fabric that's designed to do one particular thing once, which is, to land that rover on Mars safely. And I think that kind of sums up how manufacturing has gone through the industrial revolutions. And of course, technology's played a part in every step of their journey.
Wow, what an incredible story! That's amazing, isn't it?
And go look at them on the John Heath or Heathcote Fabrics. It's all there on their website. Really interesting business to have a look at. I think a couple of others I'd pick on there again, because I think customers really sum up some of these things. London Taxi will be one, you'll be familiar with the black cabs. The business is now called the London Electric Vehicle Company, because that's, not only have they evolved, but also the product they're making, and driven by consumer demand, electric vehicles and so on. They've just launched a van, which is going to revolutionize the delivery market, they're hoping, in cities and so on. And again, typifies a business that's moved with the times in terms of the demand that their customers are placing on them, but also that society generally is pushing us towards electric vehicles and so on. So I think, and this is where I feel very lucky. I get to go and spend time with all of these companies, all of these businesses doing really interesting things, innovative things as well.
And your passion for technology really comes across in talking with you here today. And before you came on the podcast, I did do a little bit of research on you and the kind of work that you do. And I was fascinated by, I think you were saying that automation leads to autonomy, and how manufacturing leaders have increasingly valued the benefits which automation can bring to their business. Is that something you can talk about as well today?
Sure. Yeah. So I think autonomy and automation, interesting, similar words, but very different things. And what does automation mean, or what does it lead to? So people think of automation in terms of robotics. I'm trying not to use too many acronyms, but RPA, robotic process automation. That's kind of what people think about in terms of that mechanical automation, where they see robots on the production line. But of course, what we're now moving into is the eras of artificial intelligence, machine learning, where the tools out there, that the machines, that the computers learn from us, whether that be recognizing how to drive vehicles by seeing thousands of images and people telling them what they mean and everything else. But the final stage of automation that we're coming towards now is cognitive, or atomic automation, cutting edge really. And this is where we're beginning to say, can technology begin to think like humans and do things that, in those ways? I think that can be a very scary prospect, but quite an exciting prospect as well. And of course, what that does mean is that all of that automation will lead to processes being completely autonomous, not needing human interaction and so on. Actually, that's a step too far for me, because what I'm really passionate about as well is people. And I think, in the UK, and I'm a big advocate of, made in Britain, made in the UK. I think what we do so well in the UK is innovation. We don't tend to have businesses that make thousands of widgets at very low cost. That's not where we are as a country. But what we're really good at is innovating and driving stuff forward. And for me, that, coming back to the Industry 5.0 piece, that combination of humans for innovation and driving things forward, and automation and autonomy for doing things the most efficient way, I think is what's going to be really exciting over the next few years.
It is incredibly cool. And what I also find incredibly cool is how we've moved from science fiction to reality. We started this conversation talking about those ZX Spectrum days, and comparing that to where we are now is incredible. So with that in mind, can you tell me more about the developments around things such as nano sensors and connectivity and IoT, and how those things are driving change amongst manufacturers who are looking at how it could potentially impact the products that they sell?
Yeah, it's funny. I often use the science fiction sort of analogy myself, because I think one of the things that governs this is our own imaginations. And it sounds like we grew up in pretty much the same era. And when I look back, the only things that, science fiction had that we haven't achieved so far are sort of matter transportation and time travel. Pretty much everything else, think back to the days of opening a communicator, and video conferencing off a device held in your hands. We've achieved all of that. So to a degree, I wonder if really the only thing that limits us is, as I say, our imagination, imagining what we can do with things. But absolutely bringing that back to what's happening in the real world out there. So nano sensors, IoT, connectivity, and of course, Industry 4.0 was about connecting everything together. And again, what's been really interesting over the last year, which I think has accelerated pace of change, we've seen the need for that connectivity more than ever. I'll pick on another one of my customers, Boas Fine Metalworking in the Netherlands. And these guys are really innovative in terms of how they use technology. Jos, who runs their technology or their IT department, I suppose, in old-fashioned speak. Really innovative guy. And they've done a few things over the last couple of years. For example, stock taking. They said, why do we need somebody going around doing a stock take? Let's put RFID tags on everything and let's fly a drone around the factory at night. So after lights out at night, they fly a drone around the factory. There's a great video of this on YouTube. If you go Google it, Buzz, we'll send you the link to put in the show notes. But and so they fly this drone around the factory doing a stock take, which was real science fiction type stuff. And you love it if you look at the video. But then they thought this isn't actually the most efficient. And what they did, they took that sort of combination of science fiction and brought it back to reality. And they said, during the day, we're driving around the factory with forklift trucks the whole time. Let's just put the receivers on the forklift trucks. And every time we drive past the pallets, the pallet racking, we can do the stock takes like that. So they kind of went right to the limits of science fiction and flying drones around, back to actually let's make that something practical that works on a real-time basis. So that's really cool, proper science fiction stuff. But what they've also done over the last year, when they've had to be a bit more hands off, can we get people away from the shop floor? Do we need maintenance people going around looking at machines all the time? And a really, really simple but super efficient thing they did, they went out literally and bought some float sensors, IoT devices. So where they'd got cutting machines, barrels of lubricant beside them, you can imagine that normally Joe from maintenance would walk around, check the levels in the barrels every day. They just put these simple float switches in, connected via IoT, connected them back to their ERP system. And when the levels in the barrels dropped below a certain point, it raised a maintenance order to go and change the barrel, but also raised a purchase order to go off buy some more lubricant from the supplier and so on. So that one simple step, and these sensors are just a few pounds for Amazon or a few euros because they're in the Netherlands. Literally, that was able to keep somebody off the shop floor, social distancing, all of those sort of things, but also make them more efficient, allow those, the maintenance people to be working on other things that were actually much more value adding to the process. So I think, very simple examples of how you can use some of these sensors right through to the science fiction of the drones flying around the factory type business.
Yeah, and we're also talking about, of course, now driverless trucks and driverless vehicles, which is also incredibly cool. But we still haven't got those hoverboards and jetpacks yet, have we?
Not quite, although I did, you may have seen this, another passion for mine. I love the outdoors. I'm involved with the Scouts and so on. And they are testing jetpacks on some of the mountain rescue people up in the Lake District. Because if you can get rescuers to casualties really quickly in some of these inaccessible places. So again, that's pretty cool. So I don't know, we're not far off some of that, I think.
Oh man, imagine that for a job.
Yeah, or imagine you're lying there with a broken leg thinking I want help, and out of the sky comes this jetpack man. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And it does feel like we're entering an era of accelerated revolution. I'm curious, are there any trends that you're seeing at the moment that particularly excite you?
Yeah, I think, the last 12, 15 months have driven change like never before. Whether it's revolutionary or evolutionary, I debate. I always think the word revolution has other connotations, but I think, and if you talked about the fact you've gone and looked at some of the stuff I've written or whatever else, but you'll see I've always been a little bit, that the UK especially is lagged a bit behind, I think, on Industry 4.0, those types of things. I think what the last 12 months has done is accelerated that pace of change in a tremendous way through necessity. So people have had to do that. So, even if you go back to sort of connectivity, working from home, so working practices, we've all changed that. And I think some of those things will be positives going forward. But, and others won't. I can't wait to get back to the office and see people. You talk for a living, I talk for a living. I like talking to people face to face as well. So, getting back and seeing people is going to be great. But I think what has happened in those last few months, people have become more demanding. And I think we're going to see that more B2B. So I think the Amazon effect, and we've not mentioned that at all prior, but I think the whole Amazon effect, where people expect to be able to order stuff, personalize stuff and get it delivered straight away, we're going to see a massive amount of that push back into business, where in a B2B world, people are expecting that mass personalization, mass customization, but still delivered almost from stock, almost instantaneously. I think, smart supply chains, so touchless, contactless, all throughout supply chains, everywhere else. So some of that automation we've talked about, I think lots more in terms of predictive pieces coming from the AI and those types of things. And I'll give you an example, actually. Again, one of the other markets we serve is builders merchants. I don't know whether you do any building there, whether you do any DIY.
No, you found my Achilles heel. Yeah.
Good to know where your limits are. But so we also service the building supply industry. So we've got a lot of builders merchants and people like Bradford's who are local to me down in the southwest. Lots of branches. Real traditional industry. Builders typically go to the builders merchants. It's a social opportunity, cup of tea while they're there, all those types of things. Of course, the last 12 months, contactless delivery, click and collect, all of those types of things. So even the more traditional businesses who've potentially been slower adopters of technology, suddenly, Bradfords have rolled out handheld so they can take orders from outside in the yard, click and collect slots so people can come and collect them, and even deliveries. A lot of builders merchants deliver onto site. Contactless delivery, taking an image to show that they've delivered it, getting electronic signatures or whatever else, all of those types of things. So again, I think that's driving even some really traditional industries to adopt technology where it makes sense, and I think that can only be good for efficiency and good for things going forward. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm with you as well. I wanted to get back out there. I think especially things like tech conferences and just chatting to random people about things on a show floor. Something be great to get back. And
I think you're spot on that. It would just be lovely to. I think that I probably, my sphere of communication is about 10 people now. Whereas if I walked into the office, I might talk to 50 people in a day or 100 people in a day.
Yeah.
And it is those random conversations you have to the side, isn't it? Which is so missed at the moment.
Absolutely. And there is a radical redefinition of how organisations use technology too, as well with people and processes that change business performances fundamentally. So what do you think the future of factories will look like? Is there something you can share with the listeners that will just help them bring to life what we're talking about here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think I've already mentioned a couple of times that I think what we're really good at in the UK is innovation, technology innovation. It's why a number of the Formula One companies are based here. Lots of the aerospace companies are based here. All of those types of things. But I think what technology is going to do is to take away a lot of the non-value add processes. So one of the big things we've seen over the last 12 months in Epicor is things like document automation. So, if we went back 2 years, a lot of our businesses, supplier invoices, customer invoices would have come in, somebody would have opened that letter, keyed it onto systems, all of those types of things. Partly driven by the need, to be hands off, not having people in offices. Adoption of accounts payable automation, where those documents are arriving, being scanned, automatically entered onto systems, or even just arriving electronically and being consumed by your ERP system electronically. Really high adoption of those types of automation processes. So I think when we look at a factory, I think from the offices, there's lots of stuff that's going to go on there that's going to drive automation and drive real efficiencies. And of course, what that means is if people are not opening envelopes and keying things onto systems, they can be, I was going to say, on the phone to suppliers or whatever else, actually negotiating better deals, building better supply chain relationships, doing things that people are better at rather than those admin tasks. So I think, from the offices down to the shop floor, we're going to see a lot of the non-value add, a lot of the repetitive task taken away. I've already mentioned about sort of the maintenance at Boas, how they've rolled out those types of sensors to enable those types of things. Some real traditional industries in the UK as well. Machine tools that perhaps aren't automatically connectivity enabled, but I think with the advent of really low cost, high quality sensors, putting vibration sensors on motors on lathes so you can detect when things are going out of kilter, automatic counting of things coming off the end of production lines, a lot of that I think we're going to see transforming. So we're going to do away with a lot of that real non-value add, real repetitive stuff in factory floors. So I think that's the first part of that. And I think, again, the other piece is really extending the supply chain. So those relationships up and down supply chains, connectivity. So total visibility of what's happening in your factory, when you're going to need stuff. The automotive industry has been great for that over the years. We know that just in time, getting stuff delivered just in time for the build schedules and everything else. But I think we're going to see more of that, but also, that coming from collaboration, not just forcing your suppliers to hold the stock and deliver on time, but actually that tight collaboration throughout supply chains. And again, you'll have seen the same. I'm sure you've been to buy things over the last 12 months and found that they're not available.
Yeah.
And we've all had experience of that. So I think, the supply chain disruption we've seen in the last year will also, the tools and the smart supply chains and supply chain optimization is really going to drive, be driving more efficiencies, more visibility, and so on. So I think that's where we're going to change. What I hope we don't change in the UK is that ability to have really clever ideas and think, what if I did that and how would that look, and still continue doing that. I think actually, again, things like rapid prototyping really play into that hand, 3D printing, all of these type of technologies as well, where if you can think it, you can make it now almost, and that's pretty cool as well.
It really is. And I'm curious, what kind of role do you see Epicor playing in this future that you've just provided that vision of?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because ERP is a pretty traditional piece of software, really. When you think it covers everything from financials through to, sales and purchasing and shop floor control. And really, a lot of the core hasn't come on. Your financial ledgers still need to balance. You still need to put a journal in certain ways. Double entry bookkeeping rules still apply. So you can't do a lot with some of the core things in there. But what has really changed is how we interact with systems. So this is, and again, kind of back to some of the other bits we've been talking about. So especially for the younger generation, I don't know whether you've got children, Neil. I've got 10-year-old twins. They don't even type things in. We talked about rubber keyboards on Spectrums. My kids don't type anything anymore. They just grab a smart device and they talk to Google or Siri. They ask questions. I've got a 14-year-old as well. When he's doing his homework, he just asks. He asks his smart device next to him. So I think, I think the way we interact with systems is what's really changing over the last few years, and will continue to change. So Epicor, we have our own Epicor labs, and a lot of the stuff we're doing at the moment is about user experience. So we have our own AI voice assistant, so a bit like a Siri, as is called Eva. And I can say to Eva, when was the last time this person placed an order with me? What did they buy? Put another one on for them. Or I'm running short of this. Go put a purchase order on for these people, and so on. So again, kind of coming right back to that question, the last point we made about automation and so on, that super efficiency, the next generation of ERP users aren't even going to have to open a purchase order screen and key a purchase order in to buy stuff. They're just going to talk to a smart device and say, when did I last need this? Do I need more of that? How much should I get? Where's the best place to get it from? Go place that order for me. And I think that's where Epicor is going to play a big part in the next few years. It's making these systems much more interactive with the people using them, and much more intuitive and much more intelligent. So they're doing a lot of the work, all of that automation, and just leaving people to be doing the thinking and the clever bits.
Incredibly cool. And as we look towards the future, is there anything else that excites you on the road ahead? We're all bombarded with doom and gloom on 24-hour rolling news channels. So to leave on a positive note, what is it that excites you about the future?
Yeah, so do you know, I think I may have mentioned this earlier, that whole, I think what to say about the last 12 months that's positive, but I think two things really, and that two big things have happened, and I will mention Brexit briefly, but in a positive way, because I think it happened, and it's almost been covered up by other things going on around. But that and COVID, we talked about the fact that they've driven change, and I think what's really interesting, people have learned. I certainly we have, and you may have done the same. But a lot of people I talk to, they've learned the value of certain things, but they've also learned, locally sourced food and food miles and product miles and all of these sort of things. So that whole made in Britain and made in the UK really excites me. So I think bringing back onshore manufacturing, and that is happening. We're definitely seeing a re-onshoring of manufacturing, re-onshoring of producing. In the last 3 months, we've sold solutions into 3 or 4 startup drinks producers. So we have a big market. You probably like this one, into the Scottish distillers, but we're seeing craft gins and craft cocktail makers, so Funkin Cocktails, new customer of ours. So both manufactured products, but food, drinks, lots of things coming back on shore, and that really excites me, because I think again we're pretty good at some of that stuff. So I think that's really cool. So that excites me, and I think we can only do that. I think one of the reasons that manufacturing and everything else went offshore was costs. and inefficiencies in UK manufacturing. And I think the advent of technology and the adoption of technology is increasing that efficiency, making it cost effective to do things. And I also think, and I really hope, people have learned the value of volunteering, supporting their friends, neighbours, buying local products, perhaps paying a little bit more for something they know the provenance of. And actually, that's what really excites me. It's a bit away from technology, bizarrely, but technology is a key part of that because it enables a small producer to start up in the UK and get a product to market and get it saleable as if it were a global provider through use of web stores and those types of things. So I think that's really exciting. I think really interesting one. I don't know whether you've seen, and Volvo aren't a customer of ours, but I saw an advert for Volvo cars on the TV last night, and it said, the new Volvo XC60, like your smartphone but bigger. And the whole advert was just about the tech in the car. It wasn't about the driving experience anymore. It was just about the tech. And I thought that kind of summed up where we're going at the moment. Everybody wants everything to be smart and everybody wants everything to be tech. And I think, that's exciting as well. We're entering an era of people recognizing the value that technology and smartness brings. And I think if we can combine that with the made locally, produced locally, put together locally, then I think, the next few years are going to be really bright for the UK.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And you said a few moments ago about watching your children and how they're changing, how they interact with their devices, and they're using their voice to get the information that they need. Another pattern I've seen, especially with younger audiences, is rather than type out that long SMS message to catch up on something, just hold the audio button down and send an audio message. So much quicker, more efficient. So like you said, everything is evolving so quick at the moment. But I've loved chatting with you today. And for anyone listening that would like to find out more information about anything we've talked about today, or how they can contact your team at Epicor, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, so if they want to find out what I'm up to, then LinkedIn is probably the best place. So that you'll find me on LinkedIn. If you search for Mark Hughes and Epicor, up I'll pop. And again, visit the Epicor website, which is just epicor.co.uk, if they want to know what Epicor ourselves are up to. And there's lots of info on there. I've kind of alluded to YouTube. Go look at YouTube, search for Boers, which is BOERS, and Stop Taking Epicor. You'll see the drone flying around and so on, and lots of videos on YouTube about Epicor and some of our customers on there as well. So any of those will get you there. But for me, LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me from a business perspective.
Excellent. Well, one of the things that I love doing on this Daily Tech podcast is exploring areas that you don't automatically associate with technology. So hearing about the future of factories and supply chains and the role of technology in that is incredibly cool. But if we take it right back to the very beginning, and you were sharing your story and what put you on this path, you said something which really struck a chord with me, and how we're all governed by our imagination. And essentially it's technology that brings those ideas to life. It's when those two things converge, that's where the real exciting things happen. So thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me and share that with me today.
Brilliant. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, Neil.
I do suspect that Mark is of a similar age to me, and I have a feeling that we could chat for hours about the evolution of computing, our childhood journeys, playing with a ZX Spectrum, progressing to dial-up internet, where we are now and where we're heading. All that stuff I could just chat for hours about. So I do hope I can meet Mark in person at some point. And I will try and get the links from Mark on that drone video that we were talking about, and the other story he mentioned there too. So if you pop by my website a few days after this episode goes live, go to techblogwriter.co.uk, go to podcasts. You should see everything we talked about on the blog post associated to this episode. Now, we have covered a lot today, and if anything did resonate with you, or if you want to share a story from your tech past or vision for the future, please email it over, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You want to send me an audio message that we can play on the show, you can do that on Twitter, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, just at Neil C. Hughes. But that's it for today's episode. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow, where we'll do it all again, but with a different guest and a different topic, where we will continue to explore how technology is transforming our life, our business, our home, our work, and indeed world. So all that's left for me to say is a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.